Hey y'all, popping in real quick. I'm so excited to share with y'all one of my new favorite podcasts to listen to. Therapy Tea podcast is all about the varied experiences of mental health professionals and specifically the things they wish they had known before getting into this field. Therapy Tea is hosted by Jasmine and Karen, both LPCs like me, and they interview fellow counselors to discuss all the ways that we are constantly learning and adjusting as professionals in the mental health field. What I love about Therapy Tea is how honest, candid, and really funny the conversations are every single time. While I'm listening, I can't help but constantly be nodding my head and feeling validated about my own experiences professionally. Listen, they don't shy away from telling it like it is. Therapy Tea is the perfect podcast for anyone working in the mental health field right now, and especially for anyone considering getting into it. Karen and Jasmine focus on making the reality of what it's like to work in this field more accessible and relatable, and significantly less mysterious. Therapy Tea podcast publishes new episodes every other Wednesday, and you can find them on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube, or anywhere you get your podcasts. And I had the pleasure of being on their show where I was able to talk about my not so traditional way of getting into this field. And man, let me tell you, it was just a joy to talk with Jasmine and Karen and to be able to share my story. I'm so thankful for the work that they're doing. And I really, really think that this podcast is so helpful, especially for those in the mental health field, to feel less alone. So y'all go check it out. Subscribe to their feed, Therapy Tea podcast. I promise you, you will not be disappointed. There, and welcome to the Couch Next Door, where a happy hour meets a therapy session. I'm your host, Candace Frazier, a licensed professional counselor. Each week, I'm honored to have a friend come sit on my couch, and we'll dive into an area of mental health that is impacting their world. We'll definitely laugh, probably cry, and maybe go on a rant or two, because we are all humans, full of emotions. Come hang out with us. Grab a notebook and a pen for this one. You're going to want to take notes. In today's powerful conversation, I'm joined by my new friend and just a doll of a human from Safe Space Healing Collective, Hoffman Scott. Together, we dive deep into the layered world of Complex-PTSD, also known as CPTSD, and explore how it shapes our emotional responses. Hoffman Scott is an LPC, trauma-informed practitioner, and founder of Safe Space Healing Collective, LLC. She holds a master's degree in counseling and has advanced training in somatic therapy, parts work, and mind-body integration. blends evidence-based modalities with holistic practices to help high-functioning individuals heal from past trauma and reconnect with their most authentic selves. With a grounded presence and deep intuition, she creates a space where healing, clarity, and alignment can unfold. In this conversation, Allie and I unpack the difference between big T and little t traumas and why understanding that distinction matters. Allie brings not just clinical insight, but personal experience to the table, sharing her own journey with CPTSD and the vital role that validation, authenticity, and safe relationships play in healing. We also tackle the often overlooked topics of misdiagnosis, the importance of independent thinking in mental health, and how therapeutic work isn't one size fits all. From the parts of self to the power of perspective, this episode is full of tools and insights that remind us healing is possible and deeply personal. And don't sleep on the somatic work. Learning to listen to your body's cues can completely change how you show up for yourself and others, building agency, resilience, and self-trust. If you're on a healing journey or walking with someone who is, this episode is for you. All right, y'all, here's my conversation with Hoffman Scott. I have Hoffman Scott, that's a new addition to the name. She's got married on the couch next door today. Thanks so much, Allie, for joining me. I'm looking forward to this conversation. I think I'm going to learn a lot. So I'm very excited for you to be here today.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited to chat. I nerd out on all things mental health, but it's also just
Mm-hmm.
nice to talk to somebody like-minded. So I hope we can get into all kinds of nitty-gritty good stuff and maybe even some
Yes.
giggles, you know?
Yes, absolutely. We will definitely be laughing. And we are joined by her two friends, Theo and Apollo. They're joining us in our chat session today. So Allie, tell us a little bit more about you, and if you want to talk about, your animals, I'm always up for a good animal chat too.
Absolutely. I'm a dog and duck mom, so I feel like that's kind of how I
Yes.
identify myself right now. So I got, again, Apollo, Theo, both of them are German Shepherd mixes. And then I've got my three ducks, which I'll kind of like talk about in a little bit.
Okay.
But let me introduce
Yes.
myself first. I'm Allie
Yes.
Hoffman Scott. It's still weird for me to say the extra last name also. But
Uh-huh.
yeah, so I've been practicing for a little over 5 years. That does include my student internship and everything, but I focus heavily
Mm-hmm.
on clinical mental health counseling with those who have experienced trauma and more specifically complex PTSD. So smaller, and when I say smaller, I want to be careful about that, but lots of traumatic events through a smaller period of time, rather, that can kind of
Mm-hmm.
help to
Mm-hmm.
build a personality type in a way. So I'm sure we'll get into it more, but that's kind of my specialty. And anytime you are kind of in an awkward stage of life or don't really know where to turn, those are my types of people. So I hope that gives you a little
Okay.
intro on kind of the types of people I work with and what I do.
Yeah, yeah. Well, was there a part in, whether it was your education or even your internship where that either became a passion for you or you just sort of like fell into maybe your focus being on PTSD or specifically complex PTSD? How did you fall into that?
So I would consider myself a product and a provider of therapy. The reason why I do this work is because I had to do it myself. So it's not just
Mm,
going to work for me. It's not just a job. I have a personal investment in it too. So I was in and out of counseling since I was about 9 years old. I like to say that I've been on both sides of the clipboard for those who kind
yeah.
of get that vibe or can get that visual. I think that initially I didn't think that I was going to be a therapist at all. I like to connect people, but that's not how I saw myself doing it. But
Mm,
throughout my like college career and trying out different jobs, different things, I found myself, I was like, the way I need to connect with people and the way I need to connect others is in this very vulnerable space. So not only from personal interest, but also, hey, I think I can serve a purpose here. You know what I mean?
yeah. 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 I mean, it's funny that I feel like I kind of fell into therapy, also on both sides of the clipboard, but like didn't, I'm a millennial. Therapy was not something that my mom put me in. I think if it had been more of like a mainstream thing at that time, I probably would have been in therapy. But it's just interesting to think back, like what my life looked like and how, this career sort of found me and I fell in love with it and can't imagine doing something else. Right.
I feel the exact same way. And I
Mm-hmm.
think that it was interesting going through school. A lot of my peers or like my people in my personal life are like, Allie, are you really going to have people pay to talk to you? And I said, well, that's really oversimplifying the situation.
Right.
But yeah, I'm a
Yeah.
talker. I'm good at that. But more so it's
Yeah.
guiding someone. It's not me just talking at anybody. It's talking with and to and working with
Yes.
and for even. So I always
Yes.
think that's
Yeah.
kind of a giggle point. But I feel like
Uh-huh.
honestly, our personalities are just kind of made for this.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah. Yeah, for sure. And I think you have to have a certain personality to do this work as well. I mean, but that's probably a whole other conversation. All right. Well, okay. So you talked about your dogs. Tell us about your ducks.
Yes. Okay, they are a new addition to the family. So I'll give you a
Uh-huh.
long story short. We bought a house, had a wedding, got a new puppy, which is our newest addition, Apollo, got some ducks, and just all the things, started my business all within a year. A little
Mm-hmm.
crazy, but the ducks are the newest family members. They got here 2, 3 months ago. And the reason that I got them is because I'm a like avid gardener, and between them and
Mm,
chickens, I do want their eggs for sure. But also they're
okay.
really good for the garden and they're easy to take care of. Here in Texas, it's hot, hot. So they handle heat and handle cold pretty well. But we have
Okay.
Luna, Willow, and then Indy. So they're all
Oh,
different
love
breeds
the
and
names. Okay.
all different colors.
Okay. I'm not a garden person. How are ducks good for your garden?
Better than chickens because chickens will actually tear up your soil and they'll kind of tear up your plants. But the ducks
Okay.
themselves, first of all, okay, circle of life, but they fertilize really well with them going to the bathroom kind of thing. But they
Yes.
also will eat like slugs and snails, which
Mm-hmm.
happen to be the biggest predators in my garden currently. So chickens don't eat snails
Okay.
and slugs. That would be the biggest difference as far as like foraging is concerned. But again, they're a
Mm-hmm.
lot less hard on your plants, so their beaks don't poke so
Yeah.
much in a weird way.
Okay. 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 Love it.
I had to
Okay.
do a lot of research, Candace, a lot of research because I was like, I don't know what we're doing here.
Yeah, I again, not a garden person. So I told y'all I was going to learn something. I'm already learning something. I'm learning how ducks are good for your garden. I won't probably ever have a garden, but in a trivia, if somebody says, what do you need in a garden with slugs? You need ducks, not chickens. Yeah.
And chickens are good too, but I think that they're just a little bit more like difficult to care for in the grand scheme of things. So ducks, they play in the water and stuff, and it's stinking cute. So I think they're a little more interactive and fun to watch.
Okay. So do you live like out? Do you have like do you have property or?
We live on about a half acre, and most of the lot is land rather than the house. We kind of did that on purpose. My husband and I, starting our family, we both grew up in kind of like spaced out homes. I grew up in a 2-story home. Kids' domain was upstairs, parents' domain was downstairs. But as we're building a family, I really wanted everybody to kind of congregate in a central location, living room, kitchen kind of thing. Yeah. So with that being said, we use the half acre. I've got the garden. It's like a baby homestead. Let's call it that.
Oh, I love that. Oh, that sounds adorable. Ducks, dogs, garden, tiny home. Love it. So cute.
Just cutesy, tootsie girl in the corner.
So cute. Okay, so you own Safe Space Healing Collective.
Yes, ma'am. Okay. And I didn't lead in with that with my bio, did I? That's hilarious.
I know. Well, but I'm the host, so that's my job. So tell us a little bit about that little baby of yours that you created. Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. So Safe Space itself is more of a growth concept for a wellness center that I'd really like to build it throughout the years. Right now, obviously, I've only got me and my intern right now. So she's actually starting her grad school in the fall. We're so excited for her. That's exciting. But yeah, so with Safe Space, my idea is that we want to do a whole mind, body, spirit type of approach to healing. Not everybody's into talk therapy. So what I want to do is offer some different modalities that are more approachable for people who may not be interested in the talk therapy side of things. So maybe more like trauma-informed yoga, acupuncture, things like that, where it's just kind of like a dip your toe in the water, try to see if you like it, but it's still a build your own adventure kind of concept, which is how I run my therapy room. So right now the focus is building my clientele, making sure that the quality of the business is absolutely top tier, and just serving my clients with everything they need. But yeah, so again, right now it's just me and my intern, but I work about 3 days a week seeing clients anywhere from 14 to 45 kind of.
Oh, wow. Nice. I love that. I love the idea of like that holistic, like whole self, because like you said, talk therapy is not for everybody. And I tell people that, like, and I think people sometimes are shocked. Well, that's what you do. Why would you say that? Because it's true.
It's our job to meet people where they're at. So if I'm going to sit here and try to put you in a box, I'm already doing my job ineffectively.
Totally. Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. I love that. I love that idea. I'm excited to see that grow because I think more places like that and people like you that have that vision and have that passion are so needed, because it is about meeting people where they are. And, you know, I think that's priority.
And there's a lot of like-minded people around here too. So I think it's just about leveraging those connections and really seeing how we can build a community within this larger like wellness space and kind of dripping / like the hill country. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Love it. Love it. Okay. All right, Allie, what is your rant for us today?
I think I'd have to rant about groupthink. It's the bane of my existence currently.
Oh, okay. Tell me. I'm so excited. Okay.
The independent thinkers, we need more of them. I like to give this as an example, and it's such a silly little story, but just to give everybody kind of a preface of what groupthink can be. I went to the river last year for my mom's birthday. Ironically enough, her birthday is coming up this weekend. So it really was exactly a year ago. But we were walking down to the river trying to find our little spot that we had secured. And all of a sudden, everybody's kind of in a fit about like, oh my gosh, we can't find this table. Where's designated like table 5? I don't remember what it was, but none of us could find it. And so everybody was kind of sitting there. We had people who were already at their tables kind of guiding us, or they're like, just take that one. It's fine. Like nobody's there. okay, well, and I'm sitting there, I was like, wait, but we have reservations. So I tend to be a bit of a rule follower. I was like, wait a second, let me just explore a little further. Everyone else in our group kind of just stuck there and was listening to these people like, wow, no, let's just go to this table. And I go, guys, just wait a second. Let's see what we can do. So I walk over to the side and I find the stinking table. And all I could think to myself was, oh my goodness, had we kept listening and going along just to get along, we would have ended up like clashing with the people who ended up walking down to that table that was recommended to us. So silly example, but it's just like a unique thinker starting to go the other direction. I'm not even trying to toot my own ego here either, like pat myself on the back, but it's just one of those things where if you have an independent thought, it's like when the classroom, or like if you're in the classroom, they say like, raise your hand, ask the question, because somebody probably has it also. We need those courageous individuals to speak up. You know what I mean?
Yes. Well, because if we look at the bigger problem of groupthink, I mean, we could probably go on a whole path on that. I mean, I think a lot of problematic cultural, societal things have happened as a result of groupthink. Yes. And we need to listen to the independent thinkers, because I think sometimes, I'm not going to say all the time, but I think a lot of times those independent thinkers, they're approaching it in a different way. And different doesn't mean wrong, right? It's just different. And it's valuable enough to pay attention to. So, I mean, yes, maybe that was a silly example, but it's a perfect articulation of, if we just go along to get along because everybody's saying that's what we do, what kind of issues could come about? Like for this, it was just like a clash with the other people that was their table. But what does that look like on a bigger scale? That's super problematic.
Right. And I think that some of us are even a little bit more timid. So it's kind of interesting. I've been noticing this pattern both in my clients as well as just in my personal life. COVID, I'm going to blame it. I'm going to blame it for a second. Okay. I think COVID made us much more scared of each other than maybe was necessary. And it also hit at a really vulnerable time where, I think that us as the United States are very divided, and we want that sense of belonging like every single human does. Like it's a necessary thing for each of us. But with that, though, there's all this shame bred if you land somewhere in between and you don't fit in either of the boxes. And it's like, does that have to exist? Like, do we have to be judging it? Because those independent thinkers, that's how we have innovation. That's how we got the stinking light bulb, was somebody thinking just a little bit different, right?
Yes.
So it's one of those things where if you have the independent thought, there's opportunity there. That's what I would say about it. And if we start to all be thinking the same thing, well, we're all just going to kind of get stuck in this echo chamber, for lack of a better explanation, where you're just hearing your same thoughts come back and forth. So it doesn't really challenge you to grow in any way,
Right. Well, and I like how you describe like those that maybe don't fit on one side or the other. I very much identify with that. And so I think in the past, I would judge myself for that. Like, well, do I even believe in anything if I'm like in the middle? But what I've been able to reframe that as, it's made me way more curious, right? Like, because I don't necessarily fit over here and I don't necessarily fit over here, but it makes me ask more questions. So that then I can figure out, well, then what is it? Like, maybe I'm not going to fit in either side of these, but there may be parts of that, right? And that's okay.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I think even if you're willing to say, okay, we can leverage those parts, and it's interesting because I'll talk about parts in a little bit. It's my favorite thing to talk about when it comes to trauma work, but you can use it and leverage it as a connection point. So I don't have to agree with everything that somebody is saying or the people that I come across, but it's more information for me to be able to make an informed decision about my values, my opinions, my approach, any of those things, which sounds maybe a little selfish, but also like we're all individuals trying to operate in this world. So it's okay if you look at things a little different, and it's also okay to agree to disagree. And I think that's why groupthink is a bit of a problem, is because we've forgotten how to do that as a society, in my opinion. And it just drives me a little batty sometimes. So I know it's like a frustrated rant, but it's a good one.
No, that's good. That's good. Okay. So a couple things I hear, like, to solve that problem. I know it's not really solving the problem, but be curious. Don't judge.
Yes.
Don't feel shame, right? And don't shame others. It's okay if you don't fit in a box. Anything else? What else did I miss? Like, how else do we fix this problem?
Maybe don't superimpose your beliefs on someone else. We can teach, but I think come at it from an education standpoint and hey, like just this is something that like, have you pondered on this at all? But it doesn't have to be you have to believe this or you have to buy in. And I think that a lot of times when we're trying to offer anybody anything, it doesn't really matter the topic. It could be religion, it could be politics. Like those are the heavy hitters that people are really emotionally fueled by. But I think it just allows you an opportunity again to approach it in a different way. And even if you don't agree with it, it's information.
Yes. Yes. Well, and I just wrapped up my friendship season. And I think the thing that was so interesting is a lot of these friends that were very close had differences, like religious differences, political differences, maybe cultural differences. And that was one of the number one things they said is, I love that we're different. Like this is like one of my favorite things of our friendship is that we're different and that allows us to learn from one another. And it makes me better. Right. And so, I mean, that was encouraging for me to hear because like, if we just look at the headlines, that's not what's being highlighted. The differences are embraced and make us better. It's the opposite. So yeah, I think that's so right is like just embrace
we can complement one another and it not be conflict. Right.
Yes. Yes. Yeah. So good. Okay. All right. You ready to jump into our conversation?
I think so. Let's do it.
All right. Okay. So, Allie, I'm so excited to talk about specifically complex PTSD. I think more recently in the mental health world, and I think even mainstream, that topic, those words have been much more used, right? Like, and I think we're understanding not only as mental health professionals, but just as humans, what that actually means. And I know in the talk of trauma, there's a lot of misconceptions. That word is a big word, but there's a lot of nuance to that. And so I'm excited for us to be able to talk really a lot about the nuances that make up complex PTSD. So just, in your expertise, in the work that you do, can you just give us maybe a description or a definition? What exactly is complex PTSD?
Yeah, so I think a good way to start with it is just describing PTSD and then adding on the complexity piece of it. So PTSD is often associated with an isolated event, one of those big traumatic things. And again, I'm going to introduce some language here, which is big T versus little t. My big T back there, my Theo, is making some noise, so you'll have to forgive him growling.
I don't hear. Yeah, so if you hear dogs, just know that they are just loving this conversation. It's like they're snaps. They are loving it.
It is. But with that being said, let's start with big T versus little t, and then I'll kind of dive into further PTSD and then CPTSD. So trauma itself is not what happens, it's how we respond to whatever the event was, right? So it's that emotional turmoil that we might experience following a big event. Big T's are kind of more classified as these big catastrophic events, things that you would kind of gawk at and be like, oh my gosh, that sounds absolutely terrible. Granted, it's the individual's responsibility to name it, whether it be big T or little t, because the impact is how, again, you're feeling, not the actual igniting event. So with that being said, the big T's are kind of like natural disasters, things you would gawk at. Making sense?
Okay. Yes. Well, so like when people think of trauma, like that's probably what they're going to think about, right?
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
And it's that knee-jerk reaction, and it's the pictures that you see and the kind of the fantastical side of it that you see in media, things like that. Whereas some of those smaller T's are maybe more isolated experiences or unique experiences to an individual where it may not have bothered everybody or everybody and their mother or your neighbor, but it's something that has stuck with you. So I like to offer some examples when it comes to little T's. One of my favorites is always stubbing my toe at an IHOP. I kind of didn't like IHOP anyways, but it was kind of confirmation bias number one. But it's one of those things where I just tend to avoid breakfast houses in general because it's something that I have a bad association with. I think that's kind of a silly explanation of what I'm trying to explain here, but it's something that people can relate to, But another example that I could offer would also be I have a really, really strong aversion to liquid medication. And that's because I had a little bit of a hard time taking it when I was a kid. So my parents almost again, they were trying their best, but it was a little bit forceful sometimes. And so now if I have to take like NyQuil or cough syrup or whatever, I'll kind of just avoid it on the countertop kind of thing. So little T's can come up as aversions. It can also come up as a flinch whenever you're going past a particular place that has a memory associated. Things like that. Making sense about the small T's too, or little T's?
Yes. Yeah.
The PTSD. I said that. So since we described little T's and big T's, PTSD can be associated with either of those things. We can start to have those symptoms that show up, flashbacks, nightmares, sweating and just having anxious fits, sometimes maybe even a panic attack. We can have any of those things happen as a result of having PTSD. And again, I think a lot of people often will associate it with war times. I think that's kind of where the diagnosis came from in the first place. When I was in school, that was when it became really prevalent in naming it, right? And so then we have to kind of roll over to CPTSD, which I don't know if you're familiar with this, but it's not actually a designation in the Diagnostic Statistical Manual, which is what we use as LPCs to diagnose clients. So in Europe, though, CPTSD is a very popular diagnosis, and it is in the ICD-10, so in their Diagnostic Statistical Manual. So it's kind of interesting. Diagnoses can sometimes, to me, feel like horoscopes because it's kind of like a broad stroke, and you're like, I think that kind of fits me, but it doesn't always tell you what to do with it, whatever the label might be. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Right. Do you have any insight as to why CPTSD is not in the DSM?
I haven't done a whole heck of a lot of research, but my best guess would be the fact that CPTSD could also be labeled PTSD. But again, the complexity piece means that there was a lot of events that happened over a small is relative, because the problem is it's if you've experienced traumatic events without having healed from the first one, that's really what CPTSD is if I haven't been able to reconcile all of the symptoms I'm experiencing from the one isolated event, and then I'm experiencing another one, it makes it a lot more complex for your entire persona, especially when you're going through human growth and development. Every human does, and there are specific milestones we're meant to be meeting at any particular age, right? And so the problem is if you're experiencing traumatic events, really, let's say between ages 5 and 7, you're probably going to have a harder time relating to some of your peers and building those social skills because you were really focused on just surviving in that moment rather than, living life like maybe somebody more traditionally would.
So I want to make sure that I'm understanding and that the listeners can understand. So if we're really looking at complex PTSD, would you like a simplified maybe version or definition of that is like a lot of little T's over time, and maybe we don't even recognize that it is a trauma, and they just build. And now we're starting to have these full blown PTSD symptoms like panic attacks, heightened anxiety, those kinds of things.
Right. And then in this particular case, it's harder to track back because you've had multiple moments where that wound could have been created. So it's harder to address and harder to treat for that reason. And actually CPTSD, the tagline is, I haven't been loved right. And so with that, the way CPTSD will often present is similar to a mood disorder. And so it's often misdiagnosed in that way. Again, we don't have the diagnosis here in the United States, so it's kind of doing a disservice to the individuals who are experiencing these symptoms here. But I think that's why is because there's other labels that can be utilitous in reaching the same goal. However, I think being able to label something that is truly authentic to your experience is so important.
Yeah. Well, and I imagine, I don't know, in your experience working with population of people that identify with that, like, is it sometimes even hard for them to know that they went through a trauma? Because like it's just been so much over time that is it hard for them to even say, oh yeah, I went through trauma? Hey y'all, just popping in. My friends over at Work Ethos are launching a program called Founder to CEO Fast Track in January of 2026. It's designed specifically for women founders who are done wearing all the hats and ready to make their next strategic hire without the second guessing. It's invite only, super high touch, and seriously transformational. If that sounds like where you are right now, I really think you'll want to check it out. It's a 90-day experience starting in early January with weekly live sessions, private consulting, and tools that help you lead, hire, and grow without burnout. I've seen the behind the scenes of this program, and let me tell you, it's not fluff. It's strategic, personal, and incredibly practical. You'll walk away knowing exactly who your first or next critical hire should be, how to delegate without losing control, and what it really means to step fully into your CEO role. If you're curious, check out the link in the show notes to learn more. And if it sounds like a fit, I'd be happy to connect you directly with Marty Munger, the co-founder of Work Ethos, to answer your questions.
Without a doubt, a lot of times my clients that I end up uncovering this diagnosis with would be telling me throughout our experience together, like, hey, that's not a big deal, whatever. It just minimizing their own experience because they were, I mean, they went into survival mode from that point. So it's actually trying to assess the whole person. And if there's a lot of defenses that come up, it's almost a persona that's built off of survival. So you see this in people who are really adaptable to different social situations, not somebody who's just personality wise is very outgoing, but somebody more who you're like, I don't know if that matches their true personality that I've seen in a private moment, but they're really, really vibing with these people. And sometimes that's more of a survival technique rather than a personality type itself. So does that make sense?
Well, it doesn't. It's so like, I mean, I imagine you would have to be seeing a client for some time to really even be able to pick up on that. I mean, they might come in presenting as, oh, I have heightened anxiety, or, I've got, my moods are all over the place. And so, the inclination may be to diagnose with a mood disorder, right? But as you start to unpack, like, oh, wait a minute, this is what your childhood looked like, or this is what this relationship looked like, it really starts to paint more of a picture of trauma, not necessarily a mood disorder. This is just their response out of the little T's that have been happening throughout their life.
Exactly. 100%. And I think when we start naming it in that way, where we validate the experience of that individual and speak to those different parts, and I'll explain what parts are in just a moment, but when we speak to those different parts of self, right, they're able to heal each of those individual parts moving forward and say, okay, well, so now I am this whole human. I didn't lose that part of myself because I experienced that hardship at that time. It's still skills that I can learn. So for example, that 5 to 7-year-old that I mentioned a moment ago, they can still learn those skills later on, but it's going to be something that first and foremost, like stages of change, we have to have awareness of what the issue is, and then we can start creating change and action items beyond it. It is a lot of learning about my clients to start, and then saying, hey, I mean, that seems like maybe it was a bigger deal than, you playing it off or kind of laughing it off. So you want to get into that a little bit and tell me more? And then they start to have bigger emotions surrounding whatever that igniting event was. And we can kind of dive in from there. So also leveraging kind of a moments of impact timeline. I typically will do those pretty early on in my therapy sessions with clients to help identify the good, the bad, and the ugly throughout life.
Right. Well, and probably having to point out, like, hey, that maybe wasn't as okay as or normal, I use in quotes like that maybe you thought it was. There may be something else that was at play there, and that may be contributing to what you're experiencing now.
Absolutely. And I think that something that I always want people to be thinking about is we have to grieve the things that we've lost. In the same way, we have to grieve the things that we never had. So if there's things that you were maybe lacking in your childhood, even emotional aptitude from your parents, or that gentle approach, all of that can have a huge impact on how we are as adults. And then if you ever plan to have kids, I mean, you end up seeing so many sides of yourself that you didn't even know existed. And so I really love working with parents as well, just seeing like, oh, wait, this is coming up for me. And then I kind of this is how it translates for my parenting skills. And it's a hard experience for the individual going through it, because there's grief and gratitude both at the same time. And I think throughout CPTSD healing as a whole, there's so much room for both and feelings. Oh gosh. Yes. I'm really glad you said that. That makes a lot of sense. Okay. I want to get into what working with these individuals looks like, and speak specifically to some of the specific treatments that you do in your practice. But, and we've kind of talked a little bit about what symptoms look like, but can you, because I imagine I know there's going to be people listening thinking, oh my gosh, do I have this?
right? So
Right.
what do people, I mean, not only what do people need to be aware of within themselves, but I think maybe also like aware in like the people that they love. What are certain things just to know that might, we're not going to diagnose people here on this podcast, but might allude to potential CPTSD is happening here?
I think that a big thing is the relational component is taking a look at the individual's quality of relationships in their world. So it doesn't really matter the age, but I would take, like, as a support system, I would consider, hey, is this person receiving all of the best support that they possibly can? How do their friends show up for them? How am I showing up for them? And seeing, hey, if they're having a big reaction in a moment where they've been let down, for example, if the crime doesn't match the punishment, we might need to remain curious in that moment. It's not an indicator immediately of, oh my gosh, that's what that is. But when we start to notice that, again, crime is not matching punishment, meaning reaction is not matching igniting event, that's some of the cues that we can focus on. Specifically, though, again, focused on relationships. So it's if people have experienced quite a bit of betrayal or something like that, it's, hey, how did their support system show up and tend to that wound? Did they receive that? And if you're noticing, most of the answers to these questions I'm asking is no, or not enough, or not quite, or the quality wasn't the best, probably something to consider a little bit more thoroughly. But again, these are moments where you might be experiencing night terrors, similar to playing out some of those scenarios with your loved ones, or having very fear-based types of cognitions where it's, hey, I might be losing this individual, when it's somebody who's just kind of exiting. So for example, I actually have CPTSD. This was a diagnosis that I received officially from my therapist about 2.5 years ago, but it was something that I never felt like my therapist got it quite right. I was like, I've been misdiagnosed a couple times. It never really felt like it fit for me. But I was going to offer an example here. So when my friend would leave the house, this is my best friend, right? I would have kind of an emotional fit about it. And I knew internally, I was like, this is not, I'm in my 20s. Like, that's not a reasonable reaction. And I would talk about it because I'm a verbal processor. But I noted, I was like, what is this? What is the deal? You're not abandoning me. I know we're still like best friends when you walk out my door, but I have this huge, release of emotion when you go. And so what I started to explore with my therapist, and she was like, Allie, what's going on there? And it was this huge wound of abandonment and betrayal that I experienced from previous friendships throughout middle school and high school. And so, I mean, those are some examples of what can compound to make the bigger personality, right? But you could, just that as an example is like that reaction doesn't quite match the situation.
Right, right. And so recognizing that within yourself and or recognizing that within your loved one, right? Like that it doesn't quite match. And I mean, when you look at the bigger picture, there aren't other maybe symptoms at play that would allude to a mood disorder or a different diagnosis, that it's kind of isolated in particular, maybe relationships, like what you're saying. Okay.
And to that point, I was diagnosed with bipolar disorder, but I wasn't having states of mania. And there are 3 different diagnoses within bipolar disorder, but I wasn't really fitting in any of them. I didn't have the chronic depression in the way that it explained. Like, I was very much responding to each of my igniting events or each of those wounds throughout my timeline that I was even able to track back. And so in my work with my therapist recently, she was like, Allie, no, you're responding to specific things, and you can even tack back to like, no, this is why I'm responding this way, is because of that event way back when is still prevalent in my mind. So when you're able to do that, you can make a lot more sense of your world. And to be fair, many people have hard time accessing those memories because they're soft spots. They were wounds, right? And so,
and not even identifying it as a trauma in the first place. Yeah,
exactly. Yeah. And so in working with a therapist, we can start to identify, okay, is that traumatic? Is that something that I start to define my world with? Or is that something that I start to change my lens of how I'm seeing things or how I'm receiving things? If that happens, it's something to consider maybe exploring further.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah. No, totally makes sense. Well, and so, I mean, how often are people being misdiagnosed, and that's so frustrating. I hate that.
I could go on another rant, my love, about the difference between what the job is of a counselor/therapist versus psychiatrist versus psychologist. I think it's really, really important that we all familiarize ourselves with what their roles are and what purpose they serve, because your therapist is the one who goes through all the nitty gritty day-to-day stuff with you. Whereas a psychiatrist, you probably need to tell them your overarching symptoms and then be able to take that again, kind of as, let me say it this way. Maybe therapy is the Neosporin, whereas psychiatry can be the Band-Aid.
Yeah. Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Absolutely.
So therapy actually heals the wound, whereas psychiatry kind of helps us put
it helps
something
us
on it for a while.
Right. It helps us to protect the wound so that we can heal it. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah, for sure. I love that. That is a great explanation, because people get very confused about those different roles in mental health treatment, for sure. I like that. I may have to use that. You maybe need to like copyright that or something, Allie. That's so good. I love it. Okay. So those are the symptoms for people to be aware of, that could be at play. So, I know you mentioned talking about parts, internal family systems, and I know you do. So you tell me where you want to go here with this. So when you're working with individuals with complex PTSD, how do you help them? I know that you do healing intensives. I know that you have a specific model in which you work with clients, but tell us, what do you do for them? How do you help them?
So as I kind of mentioned earlier, I really like to start with clients kind of focusing on the whole person. So whether that be going through the dimensions of wellness, so what does your environment look like? What does your social life look like? And determining your satisfaction level there. We can either start kind of that way, or I start maybe moments of timeline or moments of impact timeline. And then there's also the third component, which could be just building rapport, because you have to remember that 75% of the work that's done in therapy is based off of a positive relationship with your clinician. If you do not jive with your therapist, you are in the wrong room. I cannot stress that enough. And it's not so much about like, I have to love you as an individual, but you have to be able to work together and collaborate. That's really where the meat and potatoes is.
Well, and feel safe, right? I mean, I think especially when, I mean, not all the time you need to feel safe with your therapist, but especially if we're talking about trauma, because there is no way in hell you're going to be unpacking that stuff if you don't feel safe with this person across from you. Yeah.
Right. And I think that's also why when I plug in the moments of impact timeline, I want to make sure that we're also focused on some of the glimmers and the things that went well in our world, because we need to be able to hold space for that, the dichotomies of life, right?
Yeah, it's both and, like you said.
Yeah, exactly. And so in doing that, though, we're able to identify, hey, like here's some of the things that could have been going on that have led you to this point and led you to seek therapy. So that's pretty traditional anyways, though, right? Like when we bring clients in for talk therapy, we're like, hey, what brought you here?
Right.
Oftentimes I'm just going a couple steps further back if people are willing. And I've had clients who've told me I don't care to do that. Also fine. That's why therapy is a make your own adventure.
Right.
Oftentimes we end up having to look a little bit backwards and specific experiences anyways, but we'll start there to kind of get just the full picture. And so I can really, really, really get to know my client from how they would tell their story, not how the world tells them that their story is. So for example, oftentimes like I'll have clients, I want to explain what I mean by that is why.
Yeah, no, good. Cause I was going to ask. So yes, go ahead.
Oftentimes we hear a lot of stories about our childhood based off of how other people experienced us. Right. And so that becomes the narrative for which we write our life, right? Or that we reflect on things. So for example, most of what I hear about when I was a kiddo, like right when I was born, is my colic and that I wouldn't stop crying for 6 months straight. I mean, it's unfortunate that that's the first thing on my parents' mind, but it's also why people leave Yelp reviews, is because if something was upsetting or disgruntling, that's when you feel the need to talk about it, kind of thing. So with that, though, that's the narrative I have is, oh my gosh, I must have been a terrible baby. I had colic. I was sick. I couldn't process lactose. It wasn't a big deal, but nonetheless, like it became, in my mind, I was like, oh, am I the problem child? You know? And I was like, oh, okay. But that's what I mean by other people can start to write these stories for us. And again, notice, like, because that was the tone people are using, I didn't have the wherewithal to be like, oh, okay, as new parents, that totally makes sense. Like, y'all are sleep deprived anyways, and now you have a crying baby that you can't console. As an adult, I can reconcile that. As a kid, I'm like, you didn't like me that much. You know what I mean? From the kid brain, it doesn't quite register. So, that's kind of what I meant about other people's narrative or kind of like becoming a part of your own. So in going and tracking through some of these memories, we get to build confidence in ourselves and our own narrative. So it's almost using a little bit of narrative therapy to inform the bigger picture of who you are as a person and who you want to become. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. And I like almost teaching clients how to not invest so much in how other people see them, because that, again, that could be a whole other podcast episode, right? Like when other people tell us who we are, that becomes so confusing, because that's dependent on their experience of us. And they may have a different, like person A is going to have a different experience with me than person B. And so then who am I? Like then that becomes so confusing for us as humans. So yeah, we have to know who we are. But if we've constantly been told certain things from other people, that's who we think we are. And that's who our identity is. And that's where we hold our value. And that may actually not be true and authentic to us.
Right. And I think that this allows everybody's authenticity to shine through, because they're getting to build trust in their own experience. And so even if people flub it up, right? Like, I don't know, we're not all storytellers. You get what I'm saying?
Sure.
Like not everybody is adept to that skill, and that's totally fine. But again, being able to recount your own experience from your own perspective is so important in building trust with yourself too. Because even if you're like, well, am I remembering that correctly? If that's how you're remembering it, that's your story. You with me?
Right.
And I mean, I'm not sitting here saying we need to agree with everything. Like if you see something that's like, okay, that math doesn't math quite correctly, we can explore that further. But that's why perspective taking is so important, even in couples work, just in therapy in general, is like, okay, so how do you think that this person was experiencing it, and how are you experiencing it? And it allows for that locus of control shift, which is probably the biggest piece of work when it comes to CPTSD, is viewing the world more as here's what's happening and here's what I'm going to do about it, rather than the world is attacking me. What am I? This is drowning me. It gives you more of a sense of agency and control over your outcomes.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's really good. Which, when I think about somebody that's gone through a lot of little T's, a lot of traumas, they don't feel like they have that sense of control over that. It just feels like all these things happened to me, especially when they learn that that's their diagnosis and they want to do something about it. It's like, well, that feels really overwhelming, because how far back do I have to go? And what does that mean for me? And like, it probably feels like a lot.
I could imagine it feels like a lot. I also know it feels like a lot because I had to do the work too, you know what I mean? So it's hard because you're trying to validate your own experience. You're also still kind of consoling yourself throughout, and that's that modality. So you mentioned that I have a special modality that I work with, and it's comprehensive resource model. So it's a neurofeedback type of modality where we're focused on tending to each of the wounds and identifying parts. So I'm going to go into that just a little bit. I said I would mention what parts are. So when I mentioned the moments of impact timeline, I mentioned also human growth and development. These two things are going to go hand in hand. If we experience a big event, whether that be a little T or a big T, it can actually stunt us a little bit growth and development wise at that age or in that cognition level. Right. So what happens is that's where a part might have been created. So there's a wound at that age. And what happens is it doesn't mean that you can't keep growing. I mean, obviously, most of us turn into full-fledged adults, right? But it does mean that maybe the emotional maturity that you were meant to develop at that age didn't quite land correctly. So we're not practicing the emotional maturity in the now. Does that make sense?
Yeah. There may be some stunting that's happening when that trauma happens, right? Yeah.
Exactly. And so it's not, no, you're not stuck at age 7, but the way that you think about things might be more towards something that's a little bit more immature rather than the adult self that you're familiar with, right? So what that means is at each of these different various points, you can have a different part of self that's created. In a very fantastical version of this, if you've ever seen the movie Split, that's a dissociative identity diagnosis. That is a very extreme version of parts where these personas truly kind of come to light. Have you seen that movie? So that way I'm not
I haven't seen that movie. I mean, I understand the concept, but I'll link it in the show notes. Maybe I should watch it.
It's very fantastical. Don't get me wrong, because the guy turns into kind of like a superhuman in a way. And with DID, with the different personas, you can kind of change your chemical makeup, but that's going down a different rabbit hole of something we don't need to discuss. But if you're thinking about like how do parts exist, in this movie, there is a younger part of this guy, and his name is Hedwig. And you can tell when he goes into that part because he's very childlike and cutesy, and oh my goodness, his voice changes and all these things. So in the day to day, those with CPTSD, we're not experiencing those types of shifts. But what might happen is, okay, so I get into maybe, I'll use myself as an example again. Maybe I get into an argument with my mom, right?
Mm-hmm.
I know I'm a grown adult. I know I can handle my stuff. I've used all my tools. I know what I'm doing. If something touches on a soft spot from when when I was about 15, kind of in my most angry part of self,
Mm-hmm.
ooh, I can feel it. And I feel that wrath come up and I'm like, wait. That doesn't belong to the adult self. That doesn't belong to this situation. That was something that came from back when, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
It's a weird bodily sensation, but if your brain can catch it and you breathe for a moment, you're like, oh, okay, I don't need to react to that. I can respond in this moment, not be reactive. And again, that empowering sense of locus of control shift, I can do this instead of, oh my gosh, why did you make me react that way? Why did you provoke me in this way?
Mm-hmm.
Maybe the person did, but we all have agency over our reactions. So it's being able to say, oh, that's still valid. That wasn't just an unreasonable reaction.
Right. And I know where it came from.
Yes.
And I know reacting out of my 15-year-old self, that is survival, right? I mean, that was what you were doing as a 15-year-old, and you're not in survival mode as an adult self. Right. But it's real. I mean, there's so much there, like the awareness. And that's why it's so important to work with a therapist and to be educated on what that looks like. So I remember there have been times I've mentioned parts to clients and they will some of them will just latch onto it. And then some are like, wait, but is that multiple personalities? I'm like, okay, I get why you would think that, but no, this is it. So it can be really hard sometimes for people to understand it. But if it makes sense to you, it's so helpful.
Right. And the dissociative identity, I think that if I were to call something out that's a telltale sign, you lose time. You don't remember what happens if you are in those different parts. And this is very different where you can feel a little dissociated when triggered, but you're not going to entirely lose time or track of what was going on. Does that make sense?
Right. Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. You're still aware. Helpful. You're still in the moment. You still are experiencing what's right in front of you. It's not completely disconnected from reality.
Exactly. And I think that's a large misconception, or anyways, a large distinction between the two.
Yes. Yeah. No, that's good. That's good that you included that. Okay. So in your comprehensive resource model, you work a lot with parts with clients.
Yes. So comprehensive resource model really does resource each of your parts. So for example, I keep speaking about this 15-year-old part of self. In the work with CRM, it's a lot of, and by the way, I did say we're resourcing each part, but more than likely it's the client resourcing themselves. And again, that's reinforcing that same locus of control shift in the grand scheme of it all. So what we'll do is we'll kind of activate this part in a very, very safe way. So what CRM allows us to do is reprocess without re-traumatizing or re-experiencing. So it's a bit like EMDR in that regard, where you go through the event, but you are with EMDR, you're using the tappers to kind of keep your body safe and sound. Dare I tap into sympathetic versus parasympathetic nervous system in this moment?
Yeah, do it. Absolutely. Yes.
Okay, so I've been explaining this a lot this week. I think it's helpful, right? So I know I'm kind of pivoting us, but this will help provide some context for everybody. You know that nerve or that vein in people's forehead that kind of runs all the way down the face? That's your vagus nerve.
Right.
And in polyvagal theory, that vagus nerve runs all the way down your body, and we can leverage that nerve in order to get us from our sympathetic nervous system into our parasympathetic nervous system. And I'm going to explain what each of those are, but one is a stress response and one is more of your relaxation response to whatever igniting event you're experiencing. So the sympathetic nervous system is your fight, flight, freeze, appease, all of those different things where sympathetic, think stressed. Right?
Yeah.
And then parasympathetic, I want you thinking more relaxed, more like somebody who's maybe paralyzed, for example. Maybe not the best way to remember that, but it's helpful mnemonic nonetheless.
Yeah.
But if we can get over to that parasympathetic side, that means that we can probably handle a lot more because we are in a relaxed state. Something to think about, just assessing your body, doing a little body scan. If you close your eyes, scanning tip to toes. If you feel any tension anywhere, that can be something that shows you, hey, I might be more in my sympathetic nervous system rather than parasympathetic nervous system. So just something to kind of try and practical skill. But the reason that I'm mentioning either of those two things is we can get our clients in the in their parasympathetic nervous system while experiencing the state of stress. So it becomes a new connection point for this individual. It's no longer, oh my gosh, I feel so out of control. It's, hey, I have the power to resource myself with XYZ tool to tackle said problem or to tackle these feelings or to help like resolve that within me. Is that making sense so far?
Yes. Right. So if there's that trigger, they feel the ability to tap into their parasympathetic nervous system so that they can relax, get calm in their body and feel, like you said, that locus of control, that they don't have to react. They can just respond.
Right, because in this type of work, you are much more working in your mind's eye, and the whole point is to keep you in that parasympathetic state and to teach you how to read your body cues to say, oh my gosh, that's what's happening. And then again, taking that time to do the breath work, do the resourcing, using that tool to say, okay, I can regulate through this. And it's allowing your body and your nervous system to remember, hey, that might have been a stressful moment. Here's how we can tend to it. So again, it's building trust with that part of self that did not have that information at the time. Does that make sense?
Yes. Well, okay. So let me ask you this. How important is it for us to trust all of the different parts of ourselves? So like that 15-year-old self that is reacting, that is feeling something, how important is it for us to trust her because she's telling us something?
And absolutely imperative, in my opinion. I think that if any part of self is trying to share any type of message, for example, that means that something's bothering us and festering in our subconscious. So it kind of has to be addressed. There's a chance, like let me say this, for example, if I ignored that anger, if I ignored that part of self, it's reinforcing that same feeling they were feeling anyways, which is you don't matter, what you're experiencing is not important, any of that stuff. So if I ignore it, then I'm also being my own worst enemy, betraying myself in that moment when that part comes up. Does this make sense?
Yes. Right. So we have to listen to that because that's part of the healing process.
Yes, and it builds the authentic human, right? So we are a product, like we are a collection of our experiences, right? But it's also our lens for which we see the world can either be maybe positive or negative based on those experiences. And if we can make new associations with it, or at least the fact like, hey, that was a bad experience, but you can still have opportunity to heal and move forward. Again, it's that reminder of, hey, things might have been bad in that moment, but we have bigger things to hope for, and you do recover. It's almost being able to tell your younger self everything that they didn't know, that like, oh my gosh, hey, I own my own business now. Can you believe that? And it's like my 15-year-old self would be like, what? I didn't even think I was going to make it out of this place. You know what I mean? Or make it to whatever age or whatever, what have you. So it's, again, allowing you to write your own story and building trust with yourself and saying, okay, so yes, that reaction or that response is valid, but it doesn't serve me as a whole human now, as a healthy individual. Does that make sense?
Right. Yeah. No, it does. It does. So tell us about your healing intensives. What does that look like?
So I mentioned those moments of impact timelines. Sometimes they take a little bit longer. So doing a 90-minute session can be helpful in those moments. Also, if we have a part that came up and they're experiencing large reactions and they're kind of activated, we can use those sessions to really like pack a punch in a good way, gentle punch.
Yes.
But we can pack a punch in trying to make sure that that part feels well resourced and that they feel seen and heard. Because oftentimes those wounds, like you have to think about it. Kiddos don't have the language to support their experiences, right? So even when we're tapping into those parts of self, it can be hard to put language to it. So it needs a lot of time and space for processing. Not only that, but again, we don't want to re-traumatize anybody. So allowing them the space to resource throughout. What I mean by resource is tools. It can also be drawing on spiritual components like your higher power, things like that. So it's just allowing a lot of time and space and flexibility to work with those parts and let any of your emotions come up, because I think that many people can probably feel this. We don't make a lot of time for ourselves. And so those 90 minutes truly just allow you to drop in, have somebody hold space for you, and then be able to come back in a bit more of a regulated way and then re-enter the world. But yeah, so those 90 minutes are really, really special. And I can also do them like walk and talk sessions, things like that, where it allows people to immerse themselves in an environment that may be more comfortable for them rather than a virtual experience or sitting in an office space.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and I'm just even thinking, I know people can be very hesitant going into processing their trauma, right? I mean, first of all, sometimes they don't even know that that's really why they're here, and may take some time to get to that point. And like you said, even sometimes people will say, I don't want to talk about that. It's like, yeah, they're not ready for that. So I imagine, I could see your role as just being somebody that, like you said, just gently trying to help them get comfortable first with the idea of even exploring some of this stuff.
Right, because think about talking about it, but then trying to drop into your body and feeling it and starting to let yourself, where maybe you shut that angry part off for so long and it's like, oh, what do I do with this? It's almost like you have to build trust with yourself to say, hey, I'm allowed to feel that. It's a utilitarian emotion. However, I also want to be acting right. You know what I mean?
Right.
It's like, don't let me get carried away with it. You know?
And I feel scared if I let that part of myself be explored, because what does that look like? I've never really allowed that part of myself out, so to speak, right? And that can feel really, really scary to kind of open that can of worms, right?
100%. And also, I mean, there's also parts of ourselves that we may shut off for survival. And it's like, oh, it's just intimidating to think about even touching the sadness, the anger, the hurt, whatever it may be. Even sometimes it's hard to feel the good feelings just for whatever that's worth.
Absolutely. Yeah. Well, because
allowing yourself to feel joy.
Yes. Well, yeah, because if we shut off some emotion, we tend to shut off a lot of emotions. It's so hard to, you can't really compartmentalize emotions. You can't feel them to the fullest if you're shutting them off in some capacity.
Exactly.
Yeah. Okay. I want to talk a little bit about authenticity in this work. And thinking back to even you created Safe Space Healing Collective, like as a whole sort of self, we need to honor the whole self. So how does authenticity play a part in healing and processing CPTSD?
Authenticity plays, I mean, it's exploring your truth. That's what authenticity is, in my opinion, is your truth. It's the truth of who your core self is. That super sparkle soul piece of who you are. I'm going to sound super romanticized, but it's okay to romanticize life a little bit. Plus, that's kind of the beauty of the experience is the fact that we get to feel all these emotions. So authenticity, in my mind, again, adds truth to your own experience. It builds trust with self. It also allows people to receive you in a way. Again, it kind of fights the groupthink. Let's talk about that again.
Yes, for sure.
Authenticity allows you just to be yourself. And again, reinforcing the same idea of if I can't speak my truth, then I'm not ever going to be able to honor that. You know what I mean? So if I never say, hey, I love dogs. Well, how is the world supposed to know that I love my dogs and my duckies? You know what I mean? And it's just being able to say, hey, here's who I am. And despite whether or not we may be a good match in whatever facet that may be, as friends or like neighbors, whatever the case may be, this is who I am and this is how I want to show up in this world. And I'm proud of that. And I think that's the biggest piece, is that pride that comes with the authenticity. It's being comfortable in your own skin. And a lot of us don't start that way. There's a lot of outside noise that comes in, and it's really, really hard to be ourselves. I mean, we've all been through that awkward middle school stage and all those various experiences in life where maybe you didn't quite fit in. But I do like the little notion or the little quip and quirk that says rejection is a redirection. I think that's really important for all of us to remember.
Yes. Yeah. Well, and I'm even thinking like knowing your 15-year-old self, that part of you that is still there, that doesn't make who you are, right? Like we are made up of parts. And so knowing, honoring, understanding that allows us to know our truth, to be authentic, but also understand ourselves as a whole, because we are complex people. Like as a human, we have a lot of complexities, and a lot of those complexities come from those parts. But I know, I mean, and I see this with clients so often, they'll identify who they are with that reactionary self, right? That like we're talking about the 15-year-old self, like that's who I am. It's like, no, that's just a part of you. You are so much more than that. Like there's so much more to you that makes up who you are. But it's so easy, especially going back to what you were saying, if that's been the narrative that's been told to you is you're reactive, you have a bad temper, you're emotional, right? Then you think that's who you are, is that 15-year-old part of yourself.
Absolutely. Which that spoke straight to my heart because that's a lot of the feedback that I would receive growing up. And no, I am a loud personality. Don't get me wrong, but that doesn't mean I'm too much. I mean, shoot, my husband's one to say, I'm okay. He'll keep me.
That's right. Yeah.
You know? And you're not who you are on your worst day or your worst moment, whatever the case may be. That's a moment in your life. It doesn't have to define you as a whole individual, you know?
Yes. I love that. I think that, like, say that louder for the people in the back. Like, that is so important for people. Like, if anything, if you take away anything, please really listen to that part because, that plays a piece in everybody's life. I think it's so easy for us to identify ourselves on our worst day. And that is just, that's not what makes us human. Like, no, that's not who we are. It's very human
of you to have a bad day.
Yes.
It is a human experience. But I also think that's kind of the beauty of it is we're the only being that feels to the depth and capacity that we do, other than maybe dolphins and whales. We'll leave them to the side for a moment. But that's the beauty of the experience of being a human, you know? And I like the notion that we're spiritual beings having a human experience. So we are all come from this, like, I'm going to sound super hippie woo woo, but we all come from this place of like really love. That's where we were bred from many times. And then it turns into whatever whatever's happening in the world, but it's reminding yourself that, hey, you as a human are worthy just because you are here. It doesn't matter what anybody else thinks, how anybody else treats you. You are worthy of all the love in the world because you are. Period.
Yes. Yes. Yeah. I love that. Okay. What would be your encouragement for somebody that is listening to all of this and maybe they're identifying with some of the things that you're saying? Maybe they feel like they really need to explore this idea of, is there complex PTSD at play in my life? What would you encourage them to do as maybe their first steps or next steps in just understanding that and exploring that and healing?
Yeah, I think that just a willingness to take a look at your own background, your own history, and how you're showing up in the spaces and seeing, like taking a small assessment saying, hey, do I like this part? Like, do I like this version of myself that I'm presenting in this world? And if not, what could I potentially start to fine tune to do a little bit better? I think that just allowing yourself the availability to even take a look at yourself is something a lot of us don't do. So that would be my first place to start, is giving yourself that pause to truly just turn inward and say, okay, am I proud of how I'm showing up in the world right now? Diagnosis or not, if the answer is no, it's something to explore. And then you can start to journal a little bit. And if you're not a journaler, that's more than okay. Not everybody is. Do a little video for yourself, or like just do a voice memo, something that you can just come back to it. Because sometimes we're in a stream of consciousness or whatever. Because even in these dialogues, we're talking, we're vibing, but it'll be nice to be able to circle back and think back on some of this and listen back on the podcast and be like, oh yeah, I really love how she said that, whatever the case may be. Or that hit different because of how it landed in that moment.
Yeah,
you know?
For sure.
And so just remaining curious with yourself. And then once you find something you want to learn more about, maybe start looking into finding a good fit for you, if that's where you want to go, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. Are there certain things that you would encourage people to look for in a provider, in a therapist, if complex PTSD is what they want to explore?
Yes, I think that finding a clinician that focuses specifically on trauma is absolutely imperative. Anything neurofeedback is really, really important as well. So with the EMDR type of modality, my biggest suggestion is finding some modality that is not going to make you re-experience the events, and just making sure that you feel well resourced throughout. CRM is an example. It's not the only example. Right. And so it's also imperative that you get along with your therapist. Again, that I say that just
and
like
you feel safe.
Yes.
Safe and heard and seen.
To feel comfortable to open up. Yeah. And talk about those really raw parts of life. Because whenever you get it, it's like we say things in therapy that you never say out loud before. And there's a lot of shame that comes with that. And it's just being able to be like, oh, okay, you didn't have a reaction. That's so
Yeah.
nice.
Yes. Yes. Oh my gosh. Yes. That's huge right there. How important is somatic work when we're doing this?
I think somatic work is important for everybody, even outside of the trauma component,
Yes.
but even more
Mm-hmm.
imperative for those experiencing trauma because it lives in your body. It lives in your
Mm-hmm.
nervous system. Your nervous system is ebbing and flowing and taking in information throughout the entirety of your life. And unless we tell it, hey, you don't have to be that stressed right now, and teach it and remind our nervous system, like, hey, there are times where that's necessary, but it doesn't have to be a forever mindset or a forever feeling.
Mm-hmm.
It allows you to flex a little bit more. So it also, like, tapping into that. Have you ever tried meditation before by any
Mm-hmm.
chance?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Hard to do the first time, right? Really
Uh-huh.
hard to like get your
Yes.
brain to focus on the breath
Absolutely.
work.
Yeah.
It's flexing that muscle and really
Mm-hmm.
working it so that way we can tap in fully. And so, for example, if you just take a deep breath in through your nose and out through your mouth.
Mm-hmm.
If it's rather short, probably could be a little longer. Your out breath should always be about twice as long as your in breath. So even just
Mm-hmm.
focusing on that alone can really help to move you from that sympathetic nervous system back to
Mm-hmm.
that parasympathetic nervous system, that more relaxed state. If you don't know that your body can do that, if you don't know how to make it work in that way, it makes the job a lot harder. And then
Yeah.
it's more likely that you will re-experience the trauma because you don't trust yourself to be able to relax that. Does that make sense?
Oh yeah. Well, and I think like speaking to what you said, somatic work is important in any sort of mental health treatment because some of that is just what is our body telling us? Because a lot of times our body's telling us something way before that we recognize what's actually happening. And so if we can give space and time to that work, then we're able to listen and give space to it and maybe like come to some conclusions that would help further our treatment in certain ways, right?
Absolutely. And also,
Yeah.
I mean, you think about it, you think about people who the runners, like if you've seen anybody run a marathon, like every once in a while, they'll have that big cathartic moment.
Mm-hmm.
People are like, why are they doing that? This is why.
Mm-hmm.
They're allowing themselves to release their emotion and tap into
Mm-hmm.
those parts of themselves. It's a very methodical piece of that
Mm-hmm.
practice.
Yeah.
Um, is it their goal every time when they're running? No, but your body, when you ramp it up like that, it also wants that release, right? It's the
Right.
same thing as a panic attack. Your body goes up and it needs to decompress, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah.
it's kind of interesting. You can do that, like I said, in a different
Yeah.
way other than just talk therapy, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. Okay. Allie, is there anything that we didn't cover that you wanted to cover before I ask our last question?
I think we covered a lot. I know it's a lot of information. I hope it
Yeah.
wasn't too confusing, but I think just allowing yourself again to look inward is really the biggest deal. And
Mm-hmm.
so even if the labels don't apply to you, just saying, hey, this bothers me. And because it
Mm-hmm.
bothers me, it freaking matters.
Yes.
It
And
does.
yeah, and I want to do something about it
Yeah,
because I deserve that.
exactly.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
Hmm.
Okay, I'm going to ask this next question in two parts, and I didn't
Sure.
prepare you for this, so we're flying by the seat of our pants. Okay, first, I want you to tell us how would somebody that maybe is identifying with these symptoms of complex PTSD, how would you encourage them to take care of themselves well?
Pause.
Okay.
Slow down. Because a lot of us in survival mode are simply flying by the seat of our pants, as you just said. When you take pause, you give yourself space. And I'm not saying like go turtle mode. No, I'm saying
Right.
slow down, like breathe pace by pace, breath by breath. Even if you're driving, let yourself take in your environment. Start to notice the street signs. Start to notice the things that are passing you by along your way. And just let yourself take that in, acknowledge it. You don't got to sit there and pause the car, stop entirely, but it's just
That's
saying,
good.
hey, that's something I haven't noticed before. And you can do that externally or you can do it internally. But I think slowing down in general is the biggest thing. And
Yeah.
just adding a little pause.
Yes. Oh, I love that. Okay. Now tell us how you're taking care of yourself well these days.
Yeah. I think for me, my gardening is huge. Taking care of others as a caregiver's like we just do it. I don't know, but I think that taking care of something that then pours back into me is always a good thing. But between that and my skincare regimen and just letting myself enjoy the little baby homestead we have, I think that allowing myself to live in my quirks and live in my truth and say, hey, I'm a human who's showing up for other humans too. That's really how I take care of myself is reminding myself of my own humanity and then being able to show up for others. And again, on the authenticity, I always tell my clients, I'm like, hey, I'm going to be very much casual. We're not going to have the white walls feel like we're in a doctor's office. Put your tie on, you know? And so I think practicing what I preach is probably my best form of self-care, because I got to do the work so that way I can be there for others. And inherent, like, I have to take care of myself in order to do my job. So any of the things, but most specifically, all of the grandma hobbies, those really, really keep my life rich.
Yeah. Well, like, it's so important, I think, as therapists for us to be able to practice who we are in the therapy room. Otherwise, the amount of burnout I couldn't do this work if I couldn't be myself and have like giggles and laughs and, you know, be sarcastic sometimes in session. I don't think I could do this long term. I think I would have already been out if I couldn't be myself. So
totally agree.
Love that. Yeah.
Totally agree. And I think that, we just have to practice what we preach. And I think that my versions of self-care kind of step away from more of the mental health side because I get so much of it in my work, you know? So hobbies are important for everyone, by the way. Keep you busy.
Yes. Very good. And it's a good way to take care of yourself because, again, it reminds us of our humanity. We're not just what we do or who we are to somebody else. Like, this is important to us. And so it's important enough to do it.
Right.
Yeah. Okay. Well, Allie, thank you so much. Oh my gosh. Like, I knew I was going to learn so much in this conversation. It was so good. It was so insightful. A lot of nuggets of information here that I think is going to be so helpful for people to be able to chew on and move forward and find the help that they need or the help that maybe their loved one needs. So thank you so much. Thanks for coming on and sharing all the things.
Thank you so much for having me. I know sometimes it's hard to grasp some of the existential concepts and stuff, but I appreciate you holding space for it and always tapping in with a good question and anything. So I appreciate you having me. And thanks for having the pups too.
Of course. They were a pleasure. They were just, you know, they were around. Yeah. Wow, what a powerful and deeply insightful conversation with Allie. I hope you're walking away with a little more clarity, compassion, and curiosity about your own healing journey and maybe a few pages of notes too. I know talking about internal family systems and parts work can feel a little overwhelming for some, but this work is so transformational when it can be integrated into your healing journey. I loved what Allie said about how we are not defined by a bad day. Gosh, I don't know about y'all, but that is something I needed to hear and be reminded of pretty often. And what about Allie's explanation of therapy as neosporin and psychiatry as a Band-Aid? Y'all, I'm putting that one in my back pocket for sure. If this episode resonated with you, please know you're not alone. Complex PTSD, trauma recovery, and reconnecting with your authentic self is hard work, but it's also sacred work. Whether it's understanding the role of relationships, somatic healing, or the many parts of yourself, every step forward matters. A huge thank you to Allie for sharing her story and wisdom with such honesty. I told her after we recorded that she needs to be teaching this stuff. She was able to break down such broad, complex topics into nuggets we can actually digest and use. It was remarkable. And remember, healing doesn't happen in isolation. Find your safe spaces, your support systems, and keep showing up for yourself in whatever way you can. I hope this episode encourages you to stay grounded, stay curious, and take gentle care of yourself and those around you. The information included in this podcast does not replace that of your own professional therapy. If you believe you are in need of professional assistance, please reach out to the medical community in your area. The Couch Next Door with Candace Frazier was created by me, Candace Frazier, graphics by Jason Frazier, music by Josh Bissell. You can find the show notes and affiliate links on CandaceFrazierLPC.com. Click on the tab podcast and you'll find all podcast related content there. I'd love to connect with you on Instagram. Find me at Candace Frazier LPC. Give the show a rating or review wherever you listen to podcasts. This really helps get the show to more listeners in the world, and I would be so grateful to see what you all are loving. Until next time, show kindness to yourself and those around you.